It was Friday, almost 8 o'clock at night, when I was heading back from the pharmacy after picking up my blood pressure medication. I have 62 years on my shoulders and retired from the manufacturing plant 2 years ago. I was walking slowly through the streets of my neighborhood when I saw a child sitting on the curb. It wasn't just any child. It was my grandson. Malik, who is only 7 years old, was sitting there all alone, with his face bruised and his knees scraped. His school uniform was covered in dirt. His backpack was tossed to the side, and he was crying softly. That kind of quiet crying children do when they don't even have the strength left to make noise. My heart skipped a beat. I ran to him, ignoring the sharp pain in my knee that has bothered me since my days at the factory. Malik! Malik! My boy? What happened? He lifted his red eyes toward me, and what I saw in them shattered me inside. It wasn't just sadness. It was abandonment. He was a 7-year-old boy who had already lost hope. Grandpa, his voice came out weak, barely a whisper. Mama said I am just in the way of her life. I knelt on the sidewalk, not caring about the pebbles digging into my knee. I took that boy in my arms and felt him trembling. A rage began to grow in my chest, a rage I hadn't felt in a long time. Where is your mama, Malik? She left with her new boyfriend. She told me I had to wait here until she came back. But it's dark now, Grandpa, and I'm hungry. Hungry? My grandson was hungry, sitting on a curb with a bruised face. Keisha, my own daughter, the girl I raised alone after her mother walked out on us when she was only 3, the daughter I worked double shifts for. I worked overtime every Saturday. I gave up on dating, on trips, on my own dreams. The daughter I put through college by selling the car I loved so much. That same daughter had thrown my grandson onto the sidewalk like he was trash. Do you know how much it hurts a father to discover he failed? How much it stings a man to realize the girl he raised with so much love turned into an adult capable of abandoning her own child in the street. I know physical pain. I worked 38 years lifting heavy loads, welding steel, and sweating under the sun. But this pain was different. It felt like someone had ripped a piece of my chest out and trampled on it right in front of me. Come here, my little man. Let's go to Grandpa's house. I grabbed his backpack, took his small, warm hand, and we walked the 3 blocks to my house. On the way, he told me he had been living like this for 2 weeks. 2 weeks sleeping at neighbors' houses, sometimes on the street, eating only when someone felt sorry for him. And there I was, an old man thinking everything was fine, because my daughter always said, "Don't worry, Pop, I'm taking care of Malik." How many parents out there believe children who lie with such ease? How many grandparents are being deceived while their grandchildren suffer the consequences of a generation that only thinks about itself? Now, that night, after giving Malik a bath, making him a sandwich, and tucking him into my bed, I stayed in the living room staring at the phone. I thought about whether I should call Keisha, whether I should go look for her, or whether I should do what I always did, swallow my anger, and try to keep the family together. But I looked toward the room where my grandson was finally sleeping in peace, and something changed inside me. There are moments in a man's life that define who he really is, and this was one of them. If you've ever felt like a lifetime of work as a father was worth less than a child's temporary whim, stay with me until the end of this story. Because what happened after that night taught me that a man only loses his dignity when he allows those he loves to be mistreated. My name is Elias Lattimore. I am 62 years old, and I need to go back in time a bit so you can understand how I got to that moment. Seeing my grandson abandoned on a curb like a problem, to be discarded rather than a treasure to be protected. My story as a father began too early and too hard. I was only 22 when Keisha was born. I was working as a welder in a small plant. I didn't make much, but I was a responsible man. I married her mother, Brenda, because she was pregnant. It wasn't for love, it was out of obligation. In those days, if you got a girl pregnant, you married her. There was no other way. The first few years were rough. Brenda never adjusted to being a blue-collar worker's wife. She wanted expensive clothes. She wanted to go out. She wanted a life my paycheck couldn't buy. And I worked. I worked mornings, afternoons, and nights. I took every hour of overtime. On weekends, I painted houses and fixed neighbors' cars. Anything to bring more money home. Keisha was a beautiful girl, curly hair, a quick smile, and curious about everything. By the time she was 2, I was already teaching her to recognize tools and sing the songs I sang in the shower after work. She was my joy after long days of welding steel in hellish heat. But Brenda was getting more and more dissatisfied. She complained that I came home dirty, that I smelled like a workshop, and that she deserved better. And I believed her. I thought if I worked harder, earned more, and gave her more things, it would get better. Such naivety of a man in love. When Keisha turned 3, I came home from work one Thursday and found the house empty. Not empty of furniture, but empty of life. Brenda had left and taken our daughter. She left a note on the kitchen table. I can't take this life anymore. I'm moving to Chicago to live with my sister. Keisha will have better opportunities there. Better opportunities. As if a father's love was a small opportunity. I spent 3 months in despair. I called every day, and her sister would just hang up on me. I saved up money, took time off, and went there twice. I couldn't even see my daughter. I thought about lawyers, but they were expensive, and I could barely pay the bills for an empty house. Then, one Saturday morning, 6 months later, Brenda showed up at my door alone with 2 suitcases and the face of someone who realized the grass wasn't greener on the other side. "Where is Keisha?" I asked. "At my sister's. I just came to get some things. Look, Elias, I wasn't born to be a mother. I wasn't meant for this life of laundry, cooking, and kids. Keisha is fine there." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This woman, the mother of my child, was telling me she didn't want to be a mother. "You are going to get her right now," I said. "I'm not going, and you can't make me," she replied. It was the first time in my life I raised my voice to a woman. I didn't scream. I didn't curse. But my voice had a firmness I didn't know I possessed. "Then you are going to sign a paper saying I can go get my daughter, and then you are going to get out of my house and never come back." She signed. Maybe because she realized I wasn't asking anymore. I was commanding. I drove to Chicago that same day with the signed paper and brought my daughter back. Keisha cried when she saw me, clung to my neck, and whispered in my ear, "Daddy, I knew you'd come for me." From that day on, it was just the 2 of us, and I swore I would be the best father a man could be. I worked twice as hard. I got up at 5 in the morning, made breakfast, combed her hair, took her to school, went to work, picked her up at 5 in the afternoon, helped with homework, made dinner, bathed her, and told her bedtime stories. On weekends, we went to the park, the movies, or just stayed home watching cartoons and eating popcorn I made myself. I never had another serious girlfriend. I had a few friends over the years, but nothing that interfered with being a father. Keisha was always my priority. When she turned 15, she wanted to go to a better private school. I sold my car, a '92 Buick that I loved, to pay the tuition. When she wanted SAT prep classes, I worked weekends painting houses. When she got into a business management program, I sold my new television to buy her books. Was I a doting father? Yes, and I was proud of it. Keisha graduated. She got a good job at an accounting firm. She dated a guy who seemed decent. She got married at 25 in a wedding I paid for by selling the plot of land I had bought to build a bigger house. 2 years later, Malik was born. I became a grandfather at 49, and there is no better feeling in the world. That boy was my complete joy. He stayed with me every weekend. I taught him to ride a bike, play basketball, and recognize the birds that came to eat at the kitchen window. But slowly, I noticed things were changing. Keisha started getting irritated when I asked about Malik. She said I was too attached. Her husband started treating the boy with indifference, especially after their marriage started failing. The divorce came when Malik was 5, and with it came a decline that took me too long to see. Keisha started dating other men who didn't want a woman with a kid. And every new boyfriend meant Malik was more of a burden. I offered help. I offered to keep Malik whenever she wanted to go out. I offered money for a sitter. I offered everything. But Keisha started seeing me as an inconvenience too. Pop, you don't understand. I'm still young. I have a right to be happy, she'd say, as if her happiness depended on abandoning her own son. And that's how we got to that Friday. My grandson sitting on a curb, hungry, afraid, and abandoned by his own mother. In that moment, watching that boy sleep in my bed, I understood something I should have realized long ago. Not everyone you love will love you back. Not every child you raise with love will be grateful. But that doesn't mean you stop protecting those who need it. The signs had been there for over 2 years. I chose to ignore them because believing your own daughter is capable of neglecting a child is a truth no father wants to accept. The first sign was when Malik started coming to my house always hungry, real hunger. Not the kind where a kid eats junk food and then doesn't want lunch. It was the hunger of someone who hadn't eaten in hours. I'd ask Keisha, and she'd always have an excuse ready. Oh, Pop, he's just picky. He only wants junk. But when I made him a sandwich, the boy would devour it like he wasn't sure when the next meal was coming. The second sign, his clothes. Malik always showed up in dirty clothes, sometimes torn. School uniforms that hadn't been washed in days. Sneakers with holes, socks with no heels. When I bought him new clothes, he'd show up the next week without them. Kids lose things, Pop, she'd say. But I began to suspect she was selling or giving away the things I bought him. The third sign, and this one hurt the most, Malik started being afraid to leave my house. A 6-year-old shouldn't be afraid to go home to his mother. But every time it was time to go, he'd make up excuses. A stomachache, being tired, wanting to play a little longer. Once he grabbed my leg and asked, "Grandpa, can I just live here with you?" At the time, I thought it was sweet. Now I know it was a cry for help. The fourth sign, the injuries. Malik always had scrapes, bruises, and skinned knees. Keisha said he was just clumsy and played too hard. But the bruises were too frequent, and some didn't look like they came from playing. They looked like a child who had been pushed or hit the corner of a table because he was running away in fear. The fifth sign was when he started calling his mom's boyfriend Uncle Darnell with a different tone. It wasn't affection, it was fear. Children can fake many things, but they can't hide the fear in their eyes. Every time Malik talked about Darnell, he spoke quietly, looking at the floor. But I, like an old man blinded by love for his daughter, believed her explanations. Pop, you're exaggerating. Darnell is great with him. It's just an adjustment period. Adjustment. As if a child has to adjust to being mistreated. The sixth sign happened one Sunday while he was with me. We were watching a movie when a scene came on of a child crying. Malik grabbed onto me and started crying too, out of nowhere. Grandpa, you'll never leave me alone, right? I told him, no, of course not. But that question stuck with me. Why would a 6-year-old ask that? I started paying closer attention. I noticed Keisha only showed up at my house when she needed something, borrowed money, a babysitter so she could go out, or for me to take him to the doctor because she didn't have time. But on important dates, the boy's birthday, school plays, checkups, she always had a commitment she couldn't cancel. The seventh sign was financial. Keisha started asking for money more often, always with convincing excuses. An overdue electric bill, medicine for Malik, school supplies. I gave it because it was for my grandson. But one day, by chance, I saw Darnell at a high-end liquor store buying expensive whiskey, fine steaks, and imported cheeses, paying with a roll of bills that looked a lot like the money I had given Keisha 3 days earlier for Malik's medicine. That's when I suspected the money I gave for my grandson was funding her boyfriend's lifestyle. The eighth sign was when the school principal called. Malik's teacher was worried because he was falling asleep in class. He was always late, sometimes without his homework. Your grandson needs more attention at home, Mr. Lattimore. I talked to Keisha that same day. Pop, you're getting too involved in my life. I know how to raise my son. But she didn't know, or she didn't want to. The ninth sign was the most painful. Malik started asking about his mother in a strange way. Grandpa, why does Mama get mad when I say I'm hungry? Grandpa, is it normal for Mama to leave and not say when she's coming back? Grandpa, why does Uncle Darnell say I'm an annoying brat? It was a child trying to understand why the people who should care for him treated him like a burden. The 10th sign was when I realized Malik was too thin. Not the thinness of an active child, but the thinness of a child who hasn't eaten right in months. I took him to the doctor without telling Keisha. The pediatrician was blunt. This child is malnourished. It's not severe yet, but it's clear he's not getting adequate food. When I confronted Keisha with the medical report, she exploded. Pop, are you trying to hurt me? You're trying to prove I'm a bad mother. Malik eats. He's just picky. It was the first time I saw my daughter lie to my face, knowing that I knew it was a lie. Sign number 11 was when I found Malik one Thursday afternoon, crying alone in the park near the school. It was 3 o'clock. He should have been home, but he was alone in a park. Mama went to the salon and told me to wait here. A 7-year-old boy, alone in a public park, waiting for a mother who went to get her nails done. That was when I truly understood that these weren't just signs. This was negligence. It was progressive abandonment. It was a mother who saw her own son as an obstacle to her happiness. The 12th and final sign was a conversation I overheard by chance. I was at Keisha's house, helping fix her shower, when Darnell came in talking on the phone. No, man, I can't go out tonight. Keisha's got that brat stuck to her. That brat, talking about my grandson like he was a stray dog. I left that house with a certainty. My daughter was choosing men over her son. And worse, she was letting those men mistreat my grandson. But I still didn't act. Why? Because facing the reality that you raised a daughter capable of neglecting her own child is one of the hardest things a father can do. It's admitting you failed not just as a parent, but as a molder of character. I kept pretending I believed her excuses. I kept lending money. I kept taking care of Malik on weekends and returning him to a house where he wasn't wanted until that Friday, until I saw my grandson sitting on a curb, hungry, afraid, and abandoned like trash. That's when I understood that there are moments in life when pretending you don't see is being an accomplice. And I was not going to be an accomplice to the abandonment of my own grandson. For 3 weeks after the night I found Malik on the curb, I did something I never thought I'd do in my life. I investigated my own daughter. And what I discovered broke me in a way that 38 years of hard labor never could. The exploitation wasn't just of Malik. It was of me, too. For 2 years, since I retired, I had become Keisha's personal bank. And the worst part was, I was funding the situation, thinking I was helping my grandson. I started writing everything down. As a man who worked in a plant, you learn to do things in an orderly way. Dates, amounts, details. Every time she asked for money, I noted it. The reason she gave, the amount, the date she promised to pay me back. In 2 years, Keisha had borrowed $35,000 from me. $35,000. Half of my retirement savings. Pop, it's just until the end of the month. Malik needs school clothes. $500. Pop, the electric bill came in high. $300. Pop, Malik has a tooth problem. He needs work. $800. Pop, the car broke down and I can't work without it. $1,000. Always Malik as the excuse. Always an emergency. Always a promise to pay that never happened. But the real investigation started when I decided to follow Keisha one Tuesday. She said she was taking Malik to the doctor. I took the bus 2 hours after she left her house. I went to the clinic she mentioned, and guess what? There was no appointment. Malik wasn't even a patient there. Where was she? I found out the following Thursday. I followed her to a high-end shopping center downtown. She wasn't with Malik. She was with Darnell. They were entering an expensive clothing store. I saw them buying a suit that cost over $600. I asked the clerk the price after they left. A suit that cost more than I spent on groceries in 2 months. On the same day, she had asked me for $200 because Malik needed new school shoes. The economic exploitation was systematic and well planned. She knew exactly how to manipulate me. She always used Malik as the justification. She always created a sense of urgency. She always appealed to my role as a protective grandfather. And I, as an old man in love with my grandson, always believed her. But the most painful part of the investigation was discovering how Malik was really living. One Thursday, I pretended I was going to the grocery store, but I went to my grandson's school at dismissal time. I stayed back, watching. Other kids came out and were picked up by parents, grandparents, everyone happy, talking about their day. Malik came out alone, a 7-year-old boy walking alone to the bus stop, taking public transit to get home. I followed the bus in my car and saw where he got off. It wasn't at Keisha's house. It was 3 blocks away. He walked the rest of the way alone, carrying a backpack that looked far too heavy for his size. When he got to the house, no one was there. He pulled a key hidden under a flower pot and went in alone. A 7-year-old coming home to an empty house every day. I watched from the street for 2 hours. Keisha didn't get home until 7 o'clock. 2 hours my grandson spent alone at home with no supervision, no affection, no one to ask how school went. The loneliness of that child was identical to my loneliness as a 62-year-old man who discovered the daughter he raised with so much love was capable of neglecting her own son. There is a specific kind of loneliness for a man who dedicated his whole life to family and discovers that family isn't worth what he invested. It's a loneliness that hurts in your chest, that takes away your sleep, that makes food lose its taste. During those 3 weeks of investigation, I talked to other men my age at the health center, at the park, where I took Malik to play, and in the line at the bank. I discovered I wasn't the only one. There are fathers out there funding the ingratitude of adult children who only show up when they need something. There are grandparents being exploited by children who use grandchildren as emotional currency. My neighbor, Mr. Sterling, was in the same boat. He had a divorced daughter with 2 kids who only spoke to him when she needed cash. Elias, I've given that girl over $50,000. And do you know when she's ever paid me back? Never. But when I need company to go to the doctor, she's always got a commitment. Otis, who I knew from the plant, was supporting a 40-year-old son who could never get his life together. He always has a new excuse. Now he wants to start a business. Asked for $15,000. I told him I didn't have it. He called me stingy. 40 years old, Elias, and he still depends on his daddy for everything. Male loneliness is different from female loneliness. Women have friends, groups, support networks. Men of our generation were raised to be strong, to solve problems alone, not to cry over spilled milk. So, when we discover we've been exploited by our own children, we don't have anyone to talk to. We swallow the pain, pretend everything is fine, and keep getting exploited. I had been exploited for 2 years and didn't want to admit it, because admitting it would be accepting that I failed as a father. It would be accepting that the girl I raised alone, the one I put through college, the one I protected from everything, had turned into a person capable of using her own son as a tool for emotional manipulation. But the straw that broke the camel's back happened one Friday. I had agreed to pick up Malik from school so he could spend the weekend with me. I arrived early and saw a scene that destroyed me. My grandson was sitting alone on the school playground while all the other kids were playing. The teacher came to talk to me. "Mr. Lattimore, can we talk?" "Of course, ma'am." "Malik is worrying me. He always comes to school hungry. Sometimes he falls asleep during class. And, well, yesterday he asked me if he could just sleep here at the school. A 7-year-old doesn't ask that if he's being cared for at home." She continued, "Besides, he talks about you all the time. My grandpa takes me to the park. My grandpa makes me sandwiches. My grandpa tells me stories. He never talks about his mother. Never." That talk was like a punch to the gut. The teacher was telling me politely that my grandson was being neglected and that I was his only reference for care. "Teacher, if anything happens to Malik, if he shows up bruised, if you notice anything strange, call me immediately." I left my number and walked away with a certainty. I could no longer pretend I didn't see. I could no longer be an accomplice to the negligence. I could no longer lend money that funded the abandonment of my own grandson. That Friday, I took Malik home and made a decision. He was staying with me until the situation was resolved, not temporarily, but permanently. And if Keisha wanted her son back, she'd have to prove she was willing to be a real mother. I called Keisha on Saturday morning. "Keisha, Malik is staying with me this week." "Why, Pop?" "Because he needs to be here." "Needs to be there for what?" Silence. She couldn't answer because there was no answer. She didn't need Malik for anything. She needed me to fund her life and used Malik as the excuse. "Pop, you can't just decide that. I'm his mother. Then start acting like a mother." And I hung up. It was the first time in 2 years I spoke firmly to Keisha. The first time I made it clear I saw through the game. The first time I put Malik's well-being above my need to keep the family peace. But I knew it wouldn't end there. I knew my daughter. She wouldn't accept losing control of the situation without a fight. She wouldn't accept losing the emotional manipulation tool she used to get money out of me. And I was right. On Monday, she showed up at my door, and she didn't come alone. She brought Darnell and a threat that would change everything. Monday morning, 10 o'clock. I was in the kitchen making Malik breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, and cocoa. A real breakfast he hadn't had in a long time. The doorbell rang, persistent, aggressive. It was Keisha, and she wasn't alone. I opened the door to find my daughter with an expression I'd never seen on her face, rage mixed with desperation. Next to her was Darnell, looking like a man who thought he owned the place. And behind them, a woman I didn't know, dressed formally, with a folder in her hand. "Pop, this is Mrs. Henderson from CPS. She needs to evaluate Malik's conditions here." My own daughter had called Child Protective Services on me. "Good morning, Mr. Lattimore. We received a report that the child is being held here against the mother's will. May I come in?" I looked at Keisha. She couldn't hold my gaze. "Come in." The social worker spent 40 minutes in my house. She saw Malik playing in the living room, well-dressed, well-fed, happy. She talked to me about the routine we had established. Breakfast at 7. School at 8. I pick him up at 5. Homework, dinner, bath, bedtime story. A normal routine for a cared-for child. She talked to Malik, too. She asked him if he was okay, if he wanted anything, if he was afraid of anything. The boy answered naturally. He was happy. He was doing well in school. He missed his mama, but he understood she was learning to take better care of him. And who told you your mama was learning to take better care of you? No one. I just know, because my grandpa explained that sometimes adults need to learn new things, just like kids. After 2 hours of evaluation, the social worker called me aside. "Mr. Lattimore, I won't lie to you. The situation is confusing. The mother claims you are withholding the child, but from my evaluation, the child is well cared for. Here. Better cared for than, well, never mind." She had realized, as a professional with experience, that something didn't add up in Keisha's story. "What can I do, ma'am?" "Officially, I must advise that the child return to the mother's house as she is the legal guardian. Unofficially, you can file for temporary custody alleging negligence, but you will need proof." Proof. I had 3 weeks of notes. But would it be enough? After the social worker left, the confrontation I had been waiting for 2 years finally happened. "Pop, Malik is coming with me right now." "He's not going." "You can't stop me. I'm his mother." That's when Darnell decided to step in. "Look, old man, don't make things complicated. Keisha was nice enough to let the kids stay here for the weekend. That's enough." That word, old man, said, with such contempt, as if I were some ridiculous fool who knew nothing about life, and kid to refer to my grandson, right there, in my house, in my face. "What did you call me?" "Take it easy, old man. Don't get worked up." That was when something changed inside me. A definitive, irreversible change. 40 years of swallowing disrespect from supervisors at the factory. 20 years of swallowing veiled contempt from sons-in-law. 2 years of swallowing exploitation from my own daughter. But hearing that man disrespect me in my own home, in front of my grandson, was the limit. I stood up slowly from my chair. I didn't say anything. I just looked at Darnell in a way that he understood perfectly. The way a man who worked 40 years with iron and fire looks at someone who needs to be put in their place. Darnell, you have 10 seconds to get out of my house. And if I ever hear you call my grandson the kid again, you're going to find out that I might be 62. But I still remember how to handle business. The tone of my voice surprised even me. It was a voice that came from a place I thought I had lost. The voice of a man who doesn't accept disrespect. Darnell turned red, but he walked out. Keisha was speechless. Malik is not going with you today. Pop, Keisha, sit down. We're going to have a talk that's 2 years overdue. She sat, maybe because she realized I wasn't asking anymore. I was commanding. $35,000. What? $35,000. That's what you've borrowed from me in the last 2 years, always saying it was for Malik. I want it all back by Friday. Pop, are you crazy? I don't have that kind of money. I know you don't, because you spent it on your boyfriend's luxuries. So I'm going to make you an offer. You either pay me the $35,000 or you sign a document giving me temporary custody of Malik until you prove you can take care of him properly. What document? You can't do that. I pulled a sheet from the drawer, a simple but legal document I had prepared over the weekend with the help of a lawyer I knew from the plant days. I can and I will. Keisha, you have 2 options. You either accept that you need to change and let me help you be a better mother, or I go to court with everything I discovered in these 3 weeks. What did you discover? That was when I showed her the notebook. 3 weeks of detailed notes. Dates when Malik was left home alone, money requested with false justifications, conversations with the teacher, medical reports of his weight, proof that the money for Malik was being spent on other things. Keisha turned pale. Pop, you investigated me? I investigated you, and I didn't like what I found. Don't you understand? Raising a child alone is hard. I know. I did it. But needing a life is no excuse for neglecting a child. Malik went to school, asking if he could sleep there. Cared for children don't ask those things. She started to cry, but it wasn't a cry of repentance. It was the cry of someone caught in a lie who didn't know how to wiggle out. Pop, are you trying to take my son away? I want my grandson to be cared for properly. If that means you learn to be a mother again, perfect. If it means I raise him until you decide to grow up, that works too. She left without signing anything, but I knew she'd be back because Keisha always comes back when she needs something. During the rest of the week, I organized everything. I enrolled Malik in a school closer to my house so he wouldn't have to take the bus alone. I took him for a full checkup. I bought him clothes, shoes, and school supplies. I fixed up the guest room so it would be his room permanently. On Wednesday, Keisha called me. Pop, I need to talk to you. Go ahead. Darnell broke up with me. Of course he did. Men like Darnell only want women free of responsibilities. A woman with a kid is just in the way for them. And what does that have to do with me? Pop, I want to change. I want to be a better mother for Malik. But it has to be on my terms. What are your terms, Keisha? I move back in with you. I take care of Malik here at home while you work or do whatever. And we share the responsibilities. I thought about that proposal for exactly 3 seconds. No. Why? because you don't want to be a mother. You want to move back into your daddy's house because your boyfriend left you and you have nowhere else to live. Malik isn't my responsibility, Keisha. He's yours. And if you don't want that responsibility, I accept it. Pop, you can't keep Malik forever. You're 62. So what? I have another 62 years ahead of me. And every one of them will be better spent caring for a child who loves me than funding a daughter who uses me. I hung up. On Thursday, she showed up at Malik's school. The teacher called me. Mr. Lattimore, Malik's mother was here. She wanted to take him. I told her I only release the child to the person who always picks him up. She got very upset. On Friday, what I was expecting finally happened. Keisha came back with a proposal that would change everything. Friday, 6 o'clock in the evening, Keisha rang the bell. Alone this time, with a paper in her hand. Pop, I'm going to sign. It was the temporary custody document. But I have a condition. There was always a condition with Keisha. What is it? You help me with $10,000 to get myself reorganized. I'll rent a smaller apartment, get a better job, and prepare to be a mother the right way. After 6 months, I want my son back. I looked at this 37-year-old woman I had raised alone, put through college, and loved more than anything in life. And I saw someone who is still trying to use me. She was still setting conditions to do what should be natural, caring for her own son. No. What do you mean, no? I'm not giving you another dime, Keisha. And the 6 months just became an indefinite period. You can see Malik whenever you want. You can take him out. You can participate in his life, but he lives here with me until you prove with actions, not words, that you are ready to be a mother. This isn't blackmail. This is protection. I'm protecting my grandson from being neglected again. She signed the paper, crying with anger, not sadness. And in that moment, seeing my daughter sign over the temporary custody of her own child, I understood something fundamental. Loving isn't always giving the person what they want. Sometimes loving is stopping the person from continuing to make mistakes. I loved Keisha, but I loved Malik more. And between my adult daughter's comfort and my grandson's safety, there was no choice to make. But the story was far from over. Because Keisha, although she had signed the paper, still had a plan. A plan that almost worked. 3 days after she signed the temporary custody, she disappeared. She didn't answer the phone. She didn't show up at work. No one knew where she was. At first, I thought it was a tantrum, an attempt to make me feel guilty. But when 2 weeks passed with no news, I started to worry. It was her cousin, Christina, who lived in another state, who finally told me the truth. Uncle Elias, Keisha is here with me. She arrived crying, saying you took Malik away from her, that you're brainwashing the boy against her. It was incredible how Keisha managed to distort reality, turning negligence into a problem with a boyfriend, turning protection into persecution. Christina, did your cousin tell you why I kept Malik? She said it's because of the new boyfriend you didn't like. Christina, sit down, because I'm going to tell you the truth. I told her everything. The 3-week investigation, the $35,000 borrowed, Malik being too thin, the missed school days, the boy being left alone for hours. Silence on the other end of the line. Uncle Elias, I didn't know. She said you were jealous because she was dating someone, and you wanted to control her through Malik. And you believed her? I didn't know who to believe. Christina, Put your cousin on the phone. More silence. She doesn't want to talk to you. Then tell her when she's ready to have an adult conversation about her son's future, call me. Until then, Malik stays here being cared for properly. I hung up. But that talk made me realize something important. Keisha was telling a completely different version of the story to everyone. I was the villain who had stolen her grandson out of an old man's whim. A week later, I discovered the situation was worse than I imagined. The lawyer who helped me with the paperwork called me. Elias, something strange is happening. I got a call from CPS asking about your grandson's situation. It seems someone filed a report against you. A report against me. Keisha was trying to hurt me using the system. What kind of report? They claimed you are manipulating a child against his mother, that you're creating parental alienation. They're going to want to do an evaluation. Parental alienation. They were accusing me of exactly what Keisha was doing, using a child as an instrument of emotional blackmail. CPS arrived on Tuesday. 2 women and a man, all very serious with clipboards and direct questions. Mr. Lattimore, we received a report that you are illegally withholding a minor and creating conflict between him and his mother. I showed them all the documents. The temporary custody, signed by Keisha, the notes from the 3-week investigation, the medical report showing Malik was malnourished, the record of school absences, and the teacher's statements. May I speak with the minor? Of course. They spoke with Malik for nearly an hour. They asked about his routine, how he felt, about his mama, about me. The boy answered everything naturally. He was happy. He was doing well in school. He missed his mama. But he understood she was learning to take better care of him. And who told you your mama was learning to take better care of you? No one. I just know because my grandpa explained that sometimes adults need to learn new things, just like kids. After 2 hours, the conclusion was clear. There was no parental alienation. Malik was well cared for, well adjusted, and demonstrated an adequate understanding of the situation for his age. But the team leader gave me a warning. Mr. Lattimore, this report won't be the last. Someone is determined to create problems. Keep everything documented, every visit from the mother, every care for the child, because if more reports show up, they will investigate even deeper. He was right. 2 weeks later, I received a court summons. Keisha was going the legal route, asking for custody back, claiming I had coerced her into signing the document. That was like a blow to the chest. My own daughter suing me for protecting my grandson. The lawyer was blunt. Elias, she wants a war. And when someone wants a war, they'll do anything. Are you ready? Ready for what? To hear lies about yourself in public? To have your life scrutinized? To discover what a desperate person is capable of? I had no idea how true that prediction would be. The first hearing was scheduled for a month later. During that month, strange things began to happen. First, neighbors started asking me if it was true I was mistreating Malik. Someone was spreading rumors in the neighborhood. Second, my phone started ringing at strange hours. Someone would call and hang up, sometimes 3 or 4 times a night. Third, a different social worker showed up at Malik's school, asking questions about me. The teacher told me, Mr. Lattimore, it was very strange. They didn't want to know how Malik was doing. They wanted to know if you spoke badly of his mother, if the boy showed fear of you. Fourth, and this was the lowest, someone called the company where I worked at for 38 years saying I was being investigated for abuse even though I was retired. That tarnished my reputation with people who had known me for decades. Keisha was trying to destroy me socially before the hearing. She wanted me to walk in there already demoralized. already seen as a suspect. But she made a mistake that changed everything. The eve of the hearing, she showed up at my door. Not alone. She brought Darnell and 2 other men I didn't know. Pop, last chance. Hand Malik over right now voluntarily, or tomorrow in court you're going to find out what I'm capable of. Keisha, get out of my house and take those men with you. That's when Darnell spoke up. Old man, you don't know who you're messing with. Keisha's got proof you mistreat the kid. She's got photos, she's got recordings. Tomorrow you're going to lose custody, and then you're going to be prosecuted for violence. False evidence. They had fabricated evidence against me. What proof? One of the men I didn't know showed me his phone. It was a recording of a talk between Malik and me, but it was edited, cut in a way that made it sound like I was threatening the boy when I was actually explaining why he couldn't stay up late. You recorded a conversation in my house? We recorded it, and we have more. Photos showing bruises on Malik. Bruises that didn't exist, or existed from when they were neglecting him? And they took photos afterward to use against me. In that moment, seeing those 4 adults conspiring to destroy a 62-year-old man who was only trying to protect a child, I understood the level of malice my daughter was capable of, and I made a decision that changed everything. Get out of my house right now. Or what, old man? What they didn't know was that the entire conversation was being recorded. I had bought a digital recorder the week before and left it on every time I had strange visitors. Or you're going to find out that I can play dirty too. They laughed and left. But the next day, in court, I was the one who laughed. Their lawyer presented the fabricated evidence, the edited recording, the photo of old bruises, statements from manipulated neighbors, an arsenal of lies built to destroy me. When it was my turn, I presented the recording from the night before. The conversation where they confessed to fabricating evidence, the clear threat, the conspiracy to create false proof. The judge listened to everything in silence. Then he looked at Keisha with an expression I will never forget. Ma'am, you are being accused of attempting to defraud the court, in addition to perjury, ideological falsehood, and slander. Do you have anything to say? Keisha collapsed. Right there in front of the judge, she broke down, because she was caught in a lie in a way she couldn't deny. Her own voice was on the recording, admitting the evidence was fake. Darnell tried to run from the responsibility. Your Honor, I was just trying to help a desperate mother get her son back. You were helping to fabricate false evidence against a law-abiding citizen, and that has a name, a crime. The decision was unanimous. I maintained custody of Malik. Keisha temporarily lost even visitation rights until she underwent psychological counseling, and she was still going to face criminal charges for the fraud attempt. But the consequences for them went beyond the legal. Darnell was fired from his job when his boss found out he was involved in fabricating evidence. Keisha, in addition to losing her son, lost all credibility at work. The neighbors who had been manipulated felt used and stopped talking to her. The family, once they knew the truth, took my side. 6 months later, Keisha called me crying, not with anger this time, but with repentance. Pop, I ruined everything. Yes, you did. What do I do now? Learn to be a better person. And maybe one day, you'll learn to be a mother. She went through therapy for a year. She ended things with Darnell for good. She went back to school. She got a better job, and only after proving she had truly changed did she start visiting Malik again. But the damage was done. My grandson had learned that his own mama was capable of lying to hurt the person who cared for him. He learned too early that not every adult is trustworthy. The consequences of Keisha's decision were irreversible. She regained the right to visit her son, but she never completely regained his trust. Because children don't forget when they're abandoned. And they don't forgive when they see someone trying to hurt the one who protected them. Today, 3 years later, Keisha is a different person. More responsible, more mature. But she is still paying the price for the decisions she made. And she will pay it for the rest of her life. Because some bridges, once burned, never look the same, even if they are rebuilt. The first days after the hearing were strange. It wasn't relief I felt. It was a mix of sadness and a freedom I had never experienced before. Sadness because my relationship with Keisha would never be the same. Freedom because I could finally focus on what really mattered. Raising my grandson well. At 62, I was starting over as a father and discovering that being a full-time grandfather was completely different from being a father in my 20s. When I was Keisha's father, I worked all day, came home exhausted, and had little time for the things that really mattered. Now, retired, with the experience of decades and the wisdom that only time brings, I could be the kind of caregiver I always wanted to be. Malik blossomed in an impressive way. In 3 months of living with me permanently, he gained weight, improved his grades, and made new friends. But more importantly, he became a child again. He went back to laughing easily, asking curious questions, and telling incredible stories. And I discovered talents I didn't even know I had, like cooking. During all my adult life, I cooked only the basics: rice, beans, some meat, a fried egg. But with Malik, I started to venture out. I learned to make lasagna by watching YouTube videos. I learned to bake homemade bread because the boy said he wanted to try warm bread straight from the oven. I learned to make desserts because I discovered there are few pleasures in life greater than seeing a child smiling with chocolate on their face. Cooking became a therapy, a way to express affection through food made with care. And Malik, who used to complain about food with his mother, became my best food critic. "Grandpa, this lasagna is better than the restaurants," he'd say, and I'd feel like the best chef in the world. I also rediscovered the pleasure of teaching. Malik was curious about everything: how the car worked, why the sky was blue, how steel was made at the plant. And I discovered I had 40 years of stories to tell. Stories of work, of overcoming, of times when things were different. I started taking him to the workshop of Otis, my old buddy from the plant, so he could see how cars were fixed. The boy was fascinated with the tools and the process of solving mechanical problems. "Grandpa, when I grow up, I want to be like you. I want to know how to fix things." Knowing how to fix things? What a beautiful definition for a life well lived. But the greatest rebirth was emotional. For years I had felt useless, a retired old man who only served to lend money and babysit on weekends. With Malik living with me, I felt useful again, important again, needed again. Getting up early to make breakfast for someone, helping with homework, going to parent-teacher meetings, caring for him when he was sick, celebrating small victories, a good grade, a tooth falling out, a well-done drawing. These things gave meaning to my days. And Malik taught me things too. He taught me patience in a way that 40 years of work never had. Children have a different sense of time than adults. They take longer to tie their shoes, to understand an explanation, to accept that they can't do something. But that patience I learned with him made me a better person, calmer, less anxious. He also taught me to see the world with new eyes. A park that for me was just a place with playground equipment was for him a universe of possibilities. A walk down the street that for me was just exercise was for him an expedition full of discoveries. 3 months after the hearing, something happened that changed everything even more. I met Ruby. Ruby was the grandmother of Maya, a classmate of Malik's. We met at a parent-teacher meeting and started talking about the challenges of raising grandchildren. She also had custody of her granddaughter for similar reasons to mine, a daughter who couldn't care for the girl properly. It's hard, isn't it, Elias? We already raised one generation, and now we're raising another. Hard, but rewarding. With today's experience, I'm being a much better caregiver than I was when I was young. We started meeting for coffee. While the kids played, she told me about the legal battle she had to get custody of Maya. I told her about my experience with Keisha. We discovered our paths had been very similar. Ruby taught me that it wasn't too late to find new companionship. At 57, a widow for 5 years, she was also rebuilding her life around the responsibility of raising a girl. But unlike me, she had found a support group, other grandparents in the same situation. Elias, you need to meet people. Once a week, we meet at the community center. It's grandparents raising young grandchildren for different reasons. It's very good to exchange experiences. I, who was never much for groups, decided to try, and I discovered an incredible community. There was Arthur, 70 years old, raising a 12-year-old granddaughter because his daughter was in rehab. There was Mary, 65, raising twin grandsons because her son had passed away and her daughter-in-law couldn't manage alone. Each story was an example of how love can overcome the most difficult circumstances. And everyone had something in common. They were discovering that being a full-time grandparent can be even more rewarding than having been a parent. In that group, I learned parenting techniques I hadn't known. I learned about patience, how to talk to kids about tough topics, how to set boundaries without being authoritarian. But mainly, I learned that I wasn't alone. There was an entire network of people going through the same experience, with the same doubts, same fears, same joys. 1 year after the hearing, my routine was completely established. I got up at 6, made breakfast, took Malik to school, then went to the gym. Yes, I started exercising because I wanted to have the energy to keep up with an 8-year-old. I picked him up at 5, helped with homework. We had dinner together, watched TV or played a game, and he went to sleep at 9. Weekends were for special activities, parks, museums, movies, visits to friends from the support group. And the changes in me were visible. I lost 20 pounds, my posture improved. I started caring about my appearance again, not for vanity, but because I wanted to be a grandfather Malik was proud to introduce to his friends. 1 year after the hearing, Keisha asked to talk to me. She had finished therapy. She was in a better job. She lived alone in a small but tidy apartment. Pop, I want to thank you. Thank you for not giving up, for fighting for Malik when I couldn't, for forcing me to grow up. It was a hard talk. She cried a lot, admitted her mistakes, asked for forgiveness for the lies and the attempt to hurt me. Then she made a proposal that surprised me. Pop, I want Malik to keep living with you. Why? Because he's happy here. He's well cared for, well educated, and because I learned that being a mother isn't necessarily about living together. It's about caring, protecting, and being present when needed. And I can do that by visiting and being part of his life without pulling him away from a place where he's doing well. It was a mature decision, the decision of a woman who finally understood that the child's well-being comes before the adult's egos. Today, 3 years after that night, I found Malik on the curb. Our lives are balanced. He lives with me. Keisha visits twice a week and takes him some weekends, but he always comes back home, our home. I discovered that at 64, I can have a life full of purpose, joy, and companionship. I discovered that age is not a limitation to starting over, learning new things, or creating meaningful relationships. Ruby became a constant companion. We're not dating. We're too old for those complications. But we are partners in the mission of raising our grandchildren. Our weekends always include both kids, creating a family that is improvised, but genuine. Malik is 10 years old now. He's a confident, intelligent, and affectionate boy. He has good grades, real friends, and dreams for the future. Most importantly, he has the certainty that he is loved and protected. Sometimes he asks me, "Grandpa, do you regret bringing me to live here?" And I always tell him the same thing. "Malik, you saved my life as much as I saved yours." Because it's true. Caring for him gave me a purpose I didn't know I was missing. It made me a better person, more patient, more generous. It taught me that it's never too late to be the man you always wanted to be. Today, looking back, I know I would do it all again. Every confrontation with Keisha, every hearing, every sleepless night, because the result was worth every tear and every worry. At 64, I am living some of the best days of my life. And it all started with a simple decision: not to leave a child abandoned on a curb, even if it was my own grandson, even if it was my own daughter who had left him there. There are many grandparents out there seeing the signs and choosing to ignore them because it's easier to maintain family peace. How many are funding the neglect of their own grandchildren to avoid problems with adult children? I was almost one of them. For 2 years, I saw Malik getting thinner. I saw the bruises. I saw the strange behavior. And I chose to believe Keisha's explanations because accepting the truth meant admitting I had failed as a father. The truth hurts, but pretending it doesn't exist hurts more. Today at 65, I've learned some lessons I want to share, especially with men my age. First lesson: not every child you raise with love will be grateful, and that isn't your fault. Keisha had everything a child could have from a father: love, dedication, sacrifice. I sold my car. I sold my land. I worked weekends. I gave up relationships, all to give her the best life possible. And yet, she became a person capable of exploiting her own father and neglecting her own son. That doesn't mean I failed as a father. It means some people, even when they have everything, choose the wrong path. We cannot be responsible for the decisions of our adult children. Second lesson: protecting those who need protection is more important than keeping the family peace. For 2 years, I chose peace. I didn't confront Keisha. I didn't report the negligence. And the result? The problem only got bigger. The neglect got worse. And my grandson kept suffering. There is a difference between being a peaceful man and being a negligent man. The peaceful man avoids unnecessary conflict. The negligent man avoids necessary conflict. And when a child is being mistreated, conflict is necessary. Third lesson: it's never too late to start over. I thought my role as a caregiver ended when Keisha grew up. I believed my years of raising people were behind me, but I discovered at 62 I could be a better caregiver than I was at 22 because I had experience, patience, and time. Age isn't a limitation, it's an advantage. I have time to listen to his stories, to help with homework without rushing, to teach him things a young father, working 12 hours a day, doesn't have time for. Fourth lesson. There is a difference between a loan and an investment. For 2 years, I lent $35,000 to Keisha, money that never came back because it wasn't a loan. It was the funding of irresponsibility. It was an investment in destructive behavior. Men of our generation have a hard time saying no to a child's financial request. We were raised to be providers. But there is a difference between helping and being exploited. Helping is giving money to someone making an effort to improve. Being exploited is giving money to someone using you as a personal bank. Fifth lesson. Confronting someone you love is sometimes the greatest proof of love you can give. Confronting Keisha was the hardest thing I ever did. Suing my own daughter was painful, in a way I can't even explain. But it was also the greatest act of love I could do for her and for Malik. If I had kept funding her irresponsibility, Keisha would never have grown up. Sometimes loving is saying no, sometimes loving is imposing consequences. See the sixth lesson. Family isn't just blood. Family is whoever cares, protects, and loves for real. Ruby became our family, even though we have no blood relation. The support group became our protection network. A true family is who shows up when you need them, not who only shows up when they need something. If my story reached your heart, I want you to know you're not alone. If you know a father or grandfather who is accepting less than he deserves, share this message. Because many men need to understand that protecting those we love isn't selfishness, it's an obligation. How many times do we men swallow disrespect in the name of family peace? How many grandparents are funding their own humiliation? I learned at 62 that a man never doesn't have to accept crumbs from someone who received a banquet of opportunities. That being a grandfather doesn't mean being exploited. That protecting a child is more important than keeping up appearances. And that it is never, ever too late for a man to stand up and do what is right. Because in the end, it doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter how long you've been accepting an unfair situation. And it doesn't matter how many people turn against you when you decide to act. What matters is looking in the mirror and knowing you did the right thing. What matters is knowing that when someone needed your protection, you didn't hide behind excuses. What matters, knowing you chose to be the man you always wanted to be, even if it cost you. And today, 3 years later, I can say with certainty, every tear, every sleepless night, every painful confrontation was worth it. Because that boy I found sitting on a curb, abandoned and afraid, is today a happy, confident, and loved child. And that is priceless. I'm really glad you're here and that I could share my story with you. If you liked it, show me by liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Let's see how many of us there are. Write in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is. I'm so curious to know where all you wonderful people are tuning in from. If you want to support me a little extra, you can also send a small donation. I share new life stories for you every single day. And now, 2 of my most popular stories will pop up on the screen so you can choose what to watch next.